Welcome to another podcaster meetup/workshop. I'm Kyle Heimann here with the Catholic Creatives podcasting group. So you can follow us on Facebook. You just join the CC Podcasters group on Facebook. We're also posting these on YouTube. So if you're watching there, thank you. And you can find that at the Max Studios YouTube page. So follow us there as well. We're posting on the website, things like that. But thanks everybody who's been joining for these. I've gotten a lot of really good feedback from you about what's helpful. And so far, no critical feedback. So feel free if you've got any suggestions on different ideas or different way of doing things or successes that you've had that I didn't mention, please let me know so we can build this out and make it even better. So it's more helpful to people that are creating podcasts, specifically Catholics that are creating podcasts. That's who we're especially trying to, it's the niching. And that's actually kind of what we're talking about today. So maybe if we just want to go ahead and get into it, today we're talking about target audience, ideal listener avatar. So these are kind of two different things. Here, I'll pop myself up on the screen there. Target audience being a little bit broader, and then the ideal listener avatar being a very specific person that you're trying to reach, not just a broad audience. A quick recap. So if you've missed any of the past ones or need a little refresher, we've talked about what is success. What does it mean to you? Like what, are you trying to get 100,000 downloads per episode? Are you okay with 5? What's a failure? You know, are you looking for a certain number of sales or speaking gigs or connections that you're trying to make with people? What's your personal goal for the show? Can you afford a podcast? Time and money. Like, what is this actually going to take? So if you haven't done this yet, getting realistic expectations. And if you are already creating something and not seeing the results that you want, did you have unrealistic expectations, making this not as sustainable as you were anticipating? And then what is the purpose? Like, what are you promising to the listener so that every single episode delivers on that promise, whether it be entertainment, education, challenging, inspiring, a specific genre underneath there? Like, we're going to inspire you to be more, to pray more. Like, there could be a whole podcast just on inspiring people to pray more, right? That's a specific audience. And then making sure every episode comes back to that. So today we're talking about a show for everyone, as they say, is a show for no one. So we can't just be like, oh yeah, this is for everybody. My target audience is the entire world or the entire English speaking population or Spanish speaking, or like, that's too broad of an audience. And there's not going to be, unless you are a celebrity that already has a following, you're really going to have to come up with something specific. And in fact, a lot of people will refer to specific shows that, like, well, it's kind of like that show. And almost any popular show that I look at, it's either somebody that has spent years building up a following through, you know, they're an actor, a comedian, or in the Catholic world, a Catholic speaker, an author, and they've spent years, decades building up an audience. And so that whenever they launch their show, that's a little bit more generic and maybe a little more broad. They've already have the audience. So if you want to do that, good luck, but it's going to really help you if you have a more tight niche. Okay, I went into that a little bit too much deep, but there's a guy named Derek Sivers. And when I was launching a band, we had a band called Popple, and we recorded a CD, and there was a thing called CD Baby that would get your music on iTunes at the time, and now Spotify and things like that. And he would do a lot to help musicians with marketing, because the more musicians would sell, the more of a cut he gets as a percentage, right? And he said, there should be people that hate your music. That's a good thing, and it's an okay thing. We try to make music for everybody. We try to make podcasts for everybody. We try to make social posts for everybody. But he said, in reality, that's not how to do it. And he talked about this metal band that would say, if you hate Britney Spears, you're going to love our music. So who's going to hate your content? It's okay to think about that. This isn't for everybody. And another example would be like Gary Vaynerchuk, who's a marketing expert and written or has inspired a lot of books. He says he doesn't write them. He has like ghostwriters write them for him and stuff. But he's kind of offensive, and he uses offensive language, and a lot of people would not enjoy his content. My mom would be very offended by it, but he has a huge following because he knows who he's speaking to and who wants to hear his message. And he's okay with the people that don't like him. And so kind of knowing your audience and what you're going for there. Most people listening to a podcast are listening solo. It's not a common group activity to sit around the Bluetooth speaker and listen to a podcast. So knowing that, it's a very intimate thing. A lot of times you're literally inside their ears and earbuds talking to a person. So knowing who your audience is important. And then who would be your number one fan? Who's that person that wants to listen to every single episode, maybe more than once, is going to be telling about their friends to check this out, stuff like that. That's what we're talking about here as an ideal listener avatar, that number one fan. They say the riches are in the niches, or niches, if you say it. I remember somebody posted like, I don't know how to say that, because if I say niche, I sound pretentious. And if I say niche, I sound like I'm saying it wrong. Either way, oh, maybe I need to come over to this corner. Nope, I'm going to go up to this corner. Okay, the Kyle Heimann Show. This is an example here. I started doing a radio show for a Catholic radio station, and we were doing a daily show, and we had at least 2 interviews every morning. We had games, we had all kinds of different guests and bits and stuff that we would do on different days, news segments and everything. It was all over the place, and it was trying to be something for everybody. And in Catholic radio, we were the only Catholic radio station in the diocese, and so it was like the only option for people that wanted Catholic content on their drive, listening on the car. And so we were trying to be a little bit of everything to everyone. And also we're trying to fill a lot of content. And so it was kind of all over the place. Given that, it did well on radio, but didn't get a huge following on podcast. A daily show that we eventually whittled it down to 45 minutes was the podcast version. And then we started segmenting that out into segments. It was just a lot of content that wasn't always what you were interested in. So you might like today's episode, but not interested in the next 2 days' episodes, right? So what we did when we started shifting from a radio focus to a podcast focus, we split that show into 5 different shows, and we kind of cut a lot of stuff and rethought how we were doing things. So Catholicism with my kid was me and my kid sitting down talking about a topic kind of geared towards families that are having these kind of conversations about faith. Short Catholic was something 7 minutes or less, and I got different people to contribute for it and share a little something in a short amount of time. Flavor of the week was me sitting down with a priest. And this was something I did from the beginning with the radio show, very first episode, where we sit down with a local priest and do 5 different episodes involving a particular food group that they were passionate about, while we talked about 4 different aspects of their priesthood. A real fun show, but pretty much just a local show. Like if you didn't live in the area and know these priests, then it wasn't particularly interesting. Probably, I imagine. Catholic Games, we had different interviews and conversations with authors and speakers and things, but did it within the context of let's play a game around your topic or interest, or let's have some fun, and then promote your book at the end, whatever. Catholic Art History, this is sitting down with Charles and Amanda Shepard from the Fort Wayne Museum of Art, talking about different art pieces in Catholic history. So each of these had a very different target audience. And although at the time we didn't put out an ideal listener avatar, we were very intentional of like, okay, this is geared towards this person. Like a person that is interested in, Catholicism with my kid isn't necessarily interested in the art history stuff, and vice versa. And anybody would be interested in Catholic art history anywhere in the country if they were interested in that kind of topic. But anybody in the country wouldn't be necessarily interested with the thing that we did with priest for the Flavor of the Week. So just as an example, niching down really helped. And then those podcasts grew really well, at least proportionally speaking, from having that specificity. All right. Some more examples within the Catholic podcast world. And this isn't going to get into ideal listener avatar, but specifically target audience. Like Abiding Together is definitely geared towards women. I would say young women. And that doesn't mean that men don't enjoy it, like myself. I love all of these podcasts. Saints Alive is geared towards kids. It's Saint Stories for kids. The Messy Family podcast is for couples that have children, parents specifically. And then the Beatitudes is for young men. Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World is for, I don't know how to say this sensitively, but like this kind of nerd geek culture, the people that like sci-fi and talking about aliens and robots and AI and the moral implications of these things. really fascinating conversations, but also a little bit on the nerdy side, maybe a lot. And then Fierce Athlete is for women athletes. So of these, I would say I probably am mostly the target demographic for Messy Family Podcast. Although if I had to guess, their ideal listener avatar is probably a mother, a female. Beatitudes, I'm probably a little old for the demographic, but I love all of these shows, even if they're not made particularly for me. So Fierce Athlete, for example, my wife was an athlete growing up. I have a 6-year-old daughter. She is very much into athletics. And even though she's not getting into a lot of the topics that they're talking about yet, like I know she was going to be hitting these in middle school and high school and beyond. So there's a lot that I can learn from these things, even though I'm not like their ideal listener. There's still a broad audience for that. It's just the ideal listener avatar is a common marketing thing. So ideal listener avatar is specific to podcasting, but other places in marketing, they call it an ideal customer avatar if you're selling things, an ideal client avatar if you are a service business, an ideal customer profile, a buyer persona. These are all different terms for the same thing. It's this idea of really niching down and being very specific. Now some companies might have multiple ideal customers for different products, right? Like a huge company that's creating multiple different things is maybe thinking about, okay, who's the ideal customer for this product? Might even have 2 ideal customers for the same product. We're going to market to this person in this way and this person in this way. But Eric Newsom, I mentioned last week, this book, he is the first person that I've seen specifically talk about this with podcasts. Now there's a bunch of people that have talked about the ideal listener avatar with podcasting. But highly encourage checking out this book if you're interested in podcasting. But as you can see, this is a common marketing thing, as all of these are. Like this is going to be relatable if you have a YouTube channel, if you have social media, website, if you're building up an email list or a blog, or you're an author, whatever it is. Thinking intentionally about your audience is always going to be important. So part of this is just keeping your core of your show, your core, and your core audience, and thinking about who is that most dedicated, your number one fan. So if you had your first episode be in this circle, there might be, say you have 100 listeners to your first episode, maybe you have 1,000, maybe you have 20,000, right? So you've got all these different listeners that liked that episode. Then you have another episode that has a little bit different of an angle to it. There's still some people that really enjoyed that episode. There's some that said, this isn't for me. And there's also a new audience that is interested in that topic. This is a little over exaggerated, maybe. Maybe you wouldn't have 80% of your people not be interested in the second episode. But your third episode has another audience, right? And so I might be interested in the first episode, but not the second and the third. You might like the third one, but not the first and second. But your ideal listener avatar is going to be in that center there. And she's going to love all 3 of those episodes. And you need to make sure there's that core audience. You're always making content for that person. And you need to have people that want to listen to every single episode. That's I think a sign of a successful podcast. And there's definitely been podcasts that I've listened to every single episode. There's been YouTube channels that I've watched every single YouTube. Like if Casey Neistat puts out another YouTube video, I'm going to be watching it, even though he's put out thousands, right? So having that dedicated core, and it's okay if there's things that are tangentially related as long as that core is still interested. You can't have your first episode and then your second episode has some overlap. Your third episode has this kind of overlap. And then your fourth episode is kind of missing those 2. And so that ideal listener avatar would hit those 3 episodes, but isn't interested in that 4th episode, right? So really being intentional about being consistent with the content and who you're speaking to in every episode. Another example is a show we helped launch called Dr. Doctors, 3 Catholic doctors talking about Catholic medical ethics. And you could say, this is for Catholic doctors. And it was, and I mean, they would go to the Catholic Medical Association and set up and get all these doctors to start listening to their podcast. They would speak at events and things like that. But they were very intentional that their target audience was for moms, Catholic moms specifically. And they knew that the moms tend to make the medical decisions for their kids, that they make the medical decisions for themselves for sure. And they were often, like, Catholic doctors tend to be more informed on a lot of these topics. Uh, and so this was informing the general public. And it helps them keep in mind, even if this is content for doctors, which I know a lot of it was. And I know a lot of doctors that listened to it because they learned a lot from it. Uh, but by having the target audience being the mom, they know that they always have to bring things down a notch. Like, okay, mom didn't go to middle school. I mean, there are many moms, not middle school, medical school. There are many moms that did go to medical school, but their specific audience would be to one that wasn't a doctor. And so you have to bring things down and explain things for the general audience. And that makes it more applicable to a bigger crowd, potentially alienating some doctors. But then, being doctors themselves, I think they were also creating content that they were interested in. They were interviewing people that they wanted to learn from. And so they were already had like their doctor's hats on. So knowing that they were making content for the general non-doctor mom helped them to put things in perspective, helped their guests to understand the way to talk about things. And even when they were talking about things that were specific to doctors, like doctor burnout and things, like, what is the application for this for the mom that's listening? Like, how does this affect her as a patient if you know that your doctor is getting burnout? Or what are some signs to look for? Things like that. So it's very important to think about who your target audience. If there's, sometimes it's for doctors, sometimes it's for moms, sometimes it's for Catholic medical students, whatever. Like, you're bouncing all over the place. You're going to alienate people, and people are going to drop off from being that dedicated, hardcore listener. All right. So I made a worksheet, and on it is, and this could be very flexible. Like, you could rewrite some of these questions. If you look for ideal listener avatar or ideal customer avatar on Google and do like an image search, you'll get all kinds of different formats of different ways that people do it, questions they ask, things like that. This is just an idea of how you could do it. So, like, first of all, name your person. Are they going to be male or female? Find an image on a Google search. Search for what you have in mind of the person. So in the case of Doctor, they might say, a 35-year-old mom of 3 kids or whatever. Like, you describe whatever you want and see what Google pops up for images. And you don't have to worry about them being copyrighted. You're not going to post this anywhere. You're not going to be sharing this anywhere. Just drop the picture in there. What's the age, the location, the education level, the family situation? What is their background? What is their goals, challenges, and why does he or she listen to your podcast? So again, you could tweak these things. You could elaborate as much as you wanted. You could keep it shorter and simple. You could think of different things that they're interested in, or hobbies or education background. Like, do they have degrees in certain things? You can be as specific as you wanted here. And I would say, like, the more specific that you can be, the better, because if you're creating things for a specific person, again, this isn't going to alienate the people that are not that person. It's just going to make the content more consistent and more targeted towards a particular audience. So I'll give you an example. We did a show with our bishop, and I was the co-host on the show, and we ran through this process with that. And we came up with this guy. We did a Google image search. I forget what we looked for when searching for him, but we called him Greg Thompson. And Greg, I'm not going to read this whole thing. This is what we wrote up for Greg, right? I'll give you some highlights. He's 48 years old. He's got 3 kids, different ages. He's been married for 20 years. He's very active in his parish and goes on retreats. Fell away during his college years from the faith, considered himself agnostic. He went on a retreat, and now he's interested in learning as much as he can about the Catholic faith. He listens to podcasts, especially when he's fishing, and he's a corporate guy. He's a vice president of a company. He listens to the show, Truth and Charity, because he learns a lot about his faith. Also, it helps him get a connection with his bishop. So this helps us to put in perspective, okay, he doesn't have a theology degree. We need to bring things down a level for Greg. It's very practical. He's looking for answers to questions that he has about the faith. So whenever he runs into people at work, he knows how to answer them, and people are challenging him on things. Like, he's just generally interested in getting to know Bishop better and getting that relation with his bishop. So it just helps us put things into perspective. And then every episode, like, is this for Greg Thompson? is this episode just for seminarians? Is it just for priests? No, that's not who we're gearing the show to. It's for Greg. So making sure every show is something that Greg would be interested in. And again, this was kind of before we really fleshed out the process really well. But the more you can put in there about why they are listening to the show, what they are getting out of it, what's in it for them, will help you make those decisions. All right. So next week is the kind of the part 2 of the main takeaway that we had from the Eric Newsom's book, and that is why you need a 10-word description. So the 10-word description, I'll kind of tease it a little bit, and then we'll talk about it more next week. But it's basically just boiling everything down to a 10-word description that doesn't describe any other podcast, which is hard to do because depending on your niche, right? If you're just an interview show, there's a ton of Catholic interview shows. But if you are the Catholic Money Show or the Better Preach podcast, you've got a very specific and easy kind of define something that doesn't define anything else. But really thinking about what makes your show unique, and because this is all building on itself, right? So like we promised the listener something. Now, who is that listener? Let's define it. Let's flesh that out. Like this is building on what the content we're going to create and how it's going to serve the audience. And we're kind of, now that we know that, once we do the worksheet for today, which I'll post a link for it. I forget how to, I can post images, but I can't post documents. So did I do a PDF last time? Anyway, I'll put the link there. If you want a like Google Doc version of it or something like that, so you can edit it, let me know. Just put your email or send me a DM and I'll send you that. But once you fill out that ideal listener avatar this week, then our 10-word description from next week is going to be, what are they going to click on? So we'll get into that more, but you kind of have to do things in order. And this is the problem when we just start creating content. It's a fair way to do it. Like, let's just see if there's any audience for it. Like, let's not put a whole lot of effort into it to begin with. Let me work out the kinks. The first episodes aren't going to be very good. A lot of people do that, and it's a fair strategy. But if you're wanting to be successful out of the bat or sooner than later, the more work you do in the planning and thinking about the content and the audience and who you're serving and what they get out of it, the more you're going to be able to hit that audience every time and really deliver on the promise and build up a community, build up an audience that is benefiting from your content. And again, this is great for podcasting. It's good for YouTube channel. It's good for your TikTok, following or whatever. One of the things I was just talking about in a meeting earlier today is they're talking about the death of the follower. And I've seen a lot of different people talking about this, that with TikTok, with Facebook, Instagram, Twitter back in the day, it was all like you picked your followers and it just gave you content from your followers, right? And it would maybe try to organize it in a hierarchy of who it thought, what post it thought you'd be most interested in. But it was the content that you asked for. TikTok said it was all the For You page, right? And so it turned into the algorithm and not who you follow. And in fact, like, I am very meticulous on the people that I follow on Facebook and Instagram, and it's family, friends, influencers that I'm interested in, and it's just the content that I'm looking for. And TikTok, it's all just, and YouTube is moving this way, even though I have people that I follow on YouTube. Like, YouTube is serving me the algorithm, the stuff that it thinks I want based off of my outcome. And TikTok is 100% of that. I'm not following anybody on TikTok, maybe 2 people. So it's just serving me the For You page, right? Like, this is what we think that you like. And it's true. It's like, this is based off of what I liked in the past, and you know what I like. So the more things move in that direction, the more having content that is serving people and not worrying as much about the follower counts, but about creating content that is something that people are going to continue to watch and continue to enjoy, and not alienating your target audience, not drifting off into some side tangent. And when you do, like, recognize that, snap back and get back on path. I was listening to a podcast. I listened to a bunch of podcasts about this beforehand. And one was saying that he was doing a show and he was talking about being productive in creating a podcast. And he got into some of these like biohacks of like cold plunges and stuff, and how this has all made him a more productive and a podcaster. And he thought that was going to serve his community of like, you're here because you want to become a better podcaster. But it was a departure from like, if you want the biohack stuff, there's plenty of podcasts dedicated to that. And there's plenty of podcasters that aren't interested in that. And so just staying focused on the podcasting aspect of it, he realized that he had made that mistake and he corrected. I don't know if he deleted the biohack stuff or not, but being intentional about your target audience is important. It's helpful, and it'll just help you make decisions too. Like, do I cover this topic? Well, would Greg be interested or not? Like, would how long should the episodes be? Well, if he usually listens to it on his commute, then maybe you want to shoot for 20, 30 minutes. If he's a factory worker, he might have 8 hours a day to listen to podcasts. So thinking about that audience and what would they enjoy and benefit from is just going to help make everything better, and being consistent with that. And again, social media, podcast, YouTube, whatever you're posting, if you're looking for building a following, this is what all of the experts say is the best way to do that. Unless you're famous and you have a big following, then you can do kind of whatever you want. And people already, like, your target audience is people that want to hear your perspective on things, and they'll just show up. It's not the case with most of us. So if you have any questions about this, any thoughts about it, put it in the comments on the Facebook page. If you're watching on YouTube, you can comment there as well. If you have questions, feel free to reach out to me. My name's Kyle Heimann. I am with Max Studios at the University of St. Thomas in Houston. And again, happy to help out if there's any way I can with your podcast or questions about setting up a podcast. We're building up this kind of reservoir of content so that you can work through at your own pace. And again, if you want the worksheets and things like that, we'll pass those out virtually. All right. Thanks everybody for joining. Feel free to have conversations with each other in the comments so we can help build each other up, share what you're working on, what problems you're having, what issues, start your own post with your own topics, post pictures, whatever, your setup, your questions about microphones, which we'll talk about eventually. But if you have any pressing questions, hit us up either in the comments on Facebook or on YouTube, or join the CC Podcasters group on Facebook. All right. Thanks everybody for joining us again. We'll see you next week for the 10-word description.